Welcome back to Drunk on Writing. Today we're going to do something a little different. Seeing that 2017 is now dead and gone and, good riddance to it. But I kind of want to take a look back at 2017 just for a moment. We're not going to look at any of the horrible things that happened in the year, and there were so many of them. What we are going to look at are some of the books that I read throughout the year. I read 15 of them in 2017. And today we're going to do sort of a mini Drunk on Writing dissection. I usually do this over at warrenpawlowski.com, and I did. I wrote them up over there. You can go check them out if you feel like it. But I thought this would be kind of fun to grab a beer, maybe listen to a couple of books that I haven't had the chance to talk about, whether or not it's because I just didn't like them as much, or I just didn't feel like they would inspire enough of a video to create, a 10 to 15 minute thing for Drunk on Writing. I don't know. But let's get into it, shall we? First book I read in 2017 was Empires of the Sea by Roger Crowley. I really liked this book. And as the first book of the year, it came long before I even thought about doing Drunk on Writing, or else I probably would have done a dissection video on it. It just had so much detail, so much, I don't even know the word. It was just so good. Really, I could see the entire thing being made into a movie or a series of movies, several different movies. The only problem being that in today's political atmosphere, and I'm not talking the American political atmosphere, I'm just saying the worldly political atmosphere, it's probably not going to get made. Never, probably ever going to get made. Because the book details a series of battles between the Christians and the Muslims. You can see the problems there. But the book was fantastic, very well researched, very well documented. Highly recommend it. You should check it out. And the highest compliments I can give is that I then went back and added every single book by Roger Crowley onto my Amazon wish list. I love my Amazon. Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil by John Berendt. So I originally read this book years ago. I was probably a little too young to actually be reading it, given what happens in the book, particularly gaffes. Do you know what a gaffe is? I know what a gaffe is. I've known what a gaffe is for years. I shouldn't know what a gaffe is. There's no reason for me to know what that is, but I do. And I read this book again, specifically because I was using it as inspiration for my as of yet written novel, my next novel, whenever I actually feel like writing that. It was very helpful because the way that the story unfolds, where it goes from character to character, and each chapter is sort of like its own short story, is very inspiring. The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson. Now, I bought this book on a whim after watching an episode of Timeless. If you never watched that show, you should. It's got one season. I think a second season is coming up at some point. I think they're retooling it, so I don't know what it's going to be like. But the first season was great. Just went through different time periods, checked in with different characters. Just fantastic. And I bought this book seeing that it was the most highly rated historical book slash novelization. It's not a novel, but it reads like a novel of this particular serial killer, H.H. Holmes. But the book doesn't really cover a lot about him because there's not a lot known about him. He killed potentially dozens, maybe hundreds of people, all in his hotel or elsewhere, buried them, burned them, soaked them in acid, sold their skeletons. Horrible, horrible things. But at the time, he was able to work around the system. There were no records kept. So there's very little within the book to go on, which is kind of unfortunate. But the other half of the book, or the greater half of the book actually, was about the construction of the Columbian World Fair, which was amazing. I loved reading about the details of that. I wish I had been able to go see it. I actually got a little coin from my father earlier this year to commemorate the World's Fair. There was a coin that was given out that year, and it kind of, it's just kind of this thing that's like, I missed it. It's just like that one in New York where you see like the little spaceship restaurants, the ones that are in Men in Black. Wish I could have gone to that. There's still World's Fairs, apparently. just not in the United States, and probably not as cool as they once were, which is, again, really unfortunate. Nobody's making an Eiffel Tower for these things anymore, I don't think. Drug Crazy by Mike Gray. I don't really remember much of this book. Didn't really stick with me too much. It was one of the books that I picked up in college. It was a prereq for one of my sociology classes. It was good in a way. I think I remember it really frustrating me at the time that I read it. But again, it's something that a college student is going to be reading. It's basically a textbook. And it's a sociological textbook, so it goes around talking to people and looking at their experiences with the United States drug agenda, which is a very unfortunate thing, continues to be a very unfortunate thing, and will probably continue to be an unfortunate thing through this presidency, and probably the one beyond that. Hopefully, someone like me will come along and fix it one day. Moon Cop by Tom Gold. I love this book. This was great. Bought, again, one of those books that I bought on a whim. Reminded me a lot of Jason. And if you don't know Jason's works, I don't know what you're doing with your life. You gotta go fix that. I Killed Adolf Hitler. Perfect book. Maybe I'll do a video on that one day. Again, Tom Gold's book, though. Great. The story is very much played out without dialogue. It's mostly told through the art. Again, it's based on the moon. So there's a lot of emptiness, a lot of going from point A to point B, looking at the sights and exploring the loneliness of space and life in the future. Extremely well done. And just like Roger Crowley, I went back and I think I added all of Tom Gold's stuff to my Amazon wishlist as well. Haven't bought any more of them, but I will at some point. Doublecrossed by Ben McIntyre. This book took forever to get going. And it was really difficult to kind of get into because each character within the story, and this is a non-fiction book, as almost all of the books that I read this year were, each of them had three names. So they had the British spy name, the German spy name, and then their actual name. And the author would use these interchangeably. So until you kind of get caught up and realize who everybody is and flipping back and forth between the key and the chapter, it can be kind of frustrating. But once you do, it hits the ground running. Things unfold. It's kind of like you're like the balls on these people. Oh my God, the things that they went through. There was one guy who pretended to be like 50 people and would just write reports for 50 fictional people. And it's like, how do you do that? Like I can barely manage to write a book, let alone the books from 50 different people. I mean, with 50 different styles, 50 different locations, 50 different personas and jobs and whatnot. Like, that's extraordinary. And that's the kind of talent that you'd see today in the now late great Sue Grafton. I mean, there are people like that. He should have been celebrated. He should have been this worldly known author. Instead, he served his country and he served us and was a great asset. And very few people know about him, which is unfortunate. Man Alone, edited by Eric and Mary Josephson. So this book inspired my very first Drunk on Writing video. It actually inspired this entire video series because it was so ungodly depressing. And you could look at the original video I did about this for more information. But oh my God, it was just so much. It was so dense, and the book is now out of print, and I wouldn't recommend you read it. But it was inspirational in the fact that it basically led to, hey, you can sit there and be depressed, or you could do something about it. You can make something of yourself, and that's what I'm doing here. And that's why Drunk on Writing started. That's why I went into politics. And it's been a great year. So thank you, I guess, to that book. But again, don't read it. Maybe if you want to get inspired to do a YouTube video series. Packing for Mars by Mary Roach. An extremely informative book. And now, as I think I've mentioned before, maybe in one of the behind the scenes videos, I read this and it was a pre-published copy. I picked it up at Book Expo America one year. It was good. Had a lot of typos in it, a lot of random things. The humor didn't always hit, which was unfortunate. But there was a lot of cool stuff, and if you have any kind of interest in space, I'd recommend picking it up. I Kill Giants by Joe Kelly and J.M. Ken Nimura. This is, again, a book that I read here for the second time as a prompt from Kind of Funny. They did this as a comic of the week. I still love it. I just actually recommended it to a coworker whose daughter is suffering from anxiety and depression, which this book tackles absolutely head on. Now, if you have a problem with anxiety and depression, maybe you want to check it out. Or maybe if you don't, you know somebody who does. Again, worth checking out. If you don't, also worth checking out. I just simply love the book. I think it was very well done, and it's only, I think, 5 or 6 issues. I have mine in a hardcover edition, but you can pick it up as a trade. You can pick up the individual issues, I'm sure, pretty cheap. But yeah, definitely read this one if you have any kind of interest in great comics, great indie comics, or something that explores themes deeper than Superman's underwear. Leonard by William Shatner. So I read Leonard Nimoy's I Am Spock in 2016. So reading William Shatner's Leonard, which recounts a lot of the same events from William Shatner's perspective rather than Leonard Nimoy's, was very interesting, especially because their two perspectives didn't line up a lot. You know, William Shatner would kind of say, oh yeah, I remember this scene, and this is how it played out according to me. Or he'd say, no, this was just completely wrong. I kind of sort of lean toward Leonard Nimoy's take on it, just because it was written so much closer to the actual events. And you know how memory can get a little fuzzy over the years. But it was still, again, a good read, a touching read, a kind of interesting deep dive into the friendship that developed between these two lead actors. Friendship and rivalry, actually, in a lot of ways. It was very interesting. And for all you Trekkies out there, yeah, you gotta read that. Monuments Men by Robert M. Etzel. Okay, I loved this book. I did a dissection video on this book because I love this book. And you can read more about it there. But if you haven't watched that video, or if you don't plan on it, just know that while I didn't see the movie, which I should because I love Bill Murray and he's in it, and George Clooney, I think Matt Damon are in it, so that's a great cast. I didn't hear great things about the movie, but it's a hell of a cast. This book is fantastic. It shines light on this little-known point of World War II, this point that has, as far as I know, not been explored really in other films or other mediums. And it's so touching and so interesting that there's this whole band of Americans who went there to try to save European culture. And again, as I mentioned in the other video, I think it really says something that we haven't had another group like the Monuments Men since World War II. In every single other conflict that we've been in, we've had no team go in to try to protect cultures. Again, the cynic in me, is it just because it's not European? Or is it more of, the practical sense we haven't declared war and this requires a certain level of funding? I don't know. And I will never know, I'm sure. But hopefully we come around at some point and regroup the Monuments Men for something else. Tetris, The Games People Play by Box Brown. Again, another book that I picked up on a whim. I saw a signed copy at a comic book store that I happened to be in. I think it was in Philadelphia, could have been in Baltimore. But very interesting read. A lot of the information I had kind of picked up from previous books that I've read about the video game industry, particularly Game Over. So it was pretty fascinating seeing it in something of a fictionalized standpoint. Very well done, very well drawn. There were a couple points where it was almost hard to follow the narrative just based on the way that things were presented, particularly the art style. But it was enjoyable and made me really want to play Tetris again, which is great because my father still has a Game Boy that he plays Tetris on every single day of the week. Downtown Owl by Chuck Klosterman. Don't read this book. That's it. Legacy by Chuck Palahniuk. I picked this up again on a whim in a bookstore out in Boulder, Colorado, while I was over there. And it's a coloring book. It's a large print, so they have these black and white photos built around this short story, and what is essence a novella, I guess. It's not as well done as some of his novels, and I haven't colored in any of the images. I don't probably ever plan on doing that. Maybe one day, I don't know, if I'm bored. But it made my airplane ride go a little bit faster and left me just enough time to watch... What movie did I watch? I don't know. It was okay, though. I think it was an okay movie. So, perfect amount of time to read this book and watch a movie. Highly recommend it. Blood, Sweat, and Pixels by Jason Schreier. Now, I've read Schreier's articles on Kotaku for years. Long time. So when he announced that he had a book, I was like, yeah, I'm going to pick that up. So I added it to my wish list and eventually picked it up when I was just like, I feel like reading that. And I'm really glad I did. There was a lot of background information. It was very well put together, very well researched, very well informed. If you have any sort of interest in the video game industry, again, you should read this book. Particularly its insights behind such video games as Halo Wars, or Destiny, or even the failed Star Wars 1313, which, my God, I wish that game had come out. That seems like it would have been a great game. But c'est la vie, right? So yeah, that's pretty much all of the books I read in 2017, barring a few at the end of the year, which we'll be talking about soon. If you are a patron, you already know which ones I'm talking about. If you don't, and if you're not, you will soon find out. I think maybe I hinted at it a few minutes ago. I don't remember. I think I did. Oops. But anyways, I hope your reading in 2017 was just as great as mine. Please feel free to leave something in the comments below about the books that you read or things that you recommend. Maybe I'll read it in between all the other things I'll be doing this year. Again, don't wanna spoil too much. Until the next video, please feel free to subscribe. Feel free to go over to patreon.com/drunkonwriting and sign up. There's a lot of exclusives that you can get, including those behind the scenes looks that I just mentioned, and some hints as to what's to come. All right. So until I see you again, cheers and keep on riding.